Hi, I'm Haley Sweetland Edwards, a senior editor here at Time. I'm joined today by Miski Noor, Kandace Montgomery, and Artisha Saballos of Black Visions, a Minnesota-based collective of activists and organizers who were instrumental in igniting the demonstrations for justice and equality that began this summer in Minneapolis and spread throughout the country. Thank you all for being with us today. Kandace, let's begin with you. Why do you think it was that the protests in Minneapolis turned into the sustained national movement that we saw this year? What was different about this moment?
Thanks for that question, Haley. I'm glad to be here. I think that what felt uniquely different about this moment was one, that all of this was happening in a city that had had multiple tragedies in the last several years, overlaid on top of a pandemic. That folks are really at their wits' end and, are in the place where they have unfortunately, the capacity to be able to show up in the streets and to stay really active because of the impacts of the pandemic and just people really feeling what is at stake in a very, in a deeper systematic way. Mm-hmm. And then two, our work is really building off of from 2018 when we began the call to defund the Minneapolis Police Department. And unique to like other moments, we had a really concrete, popular demand that people were able to grab onto and apply to their city, their state, their local context, their country even, right? That, was not just a symbolic demand, but was something that actually could be implemented through structural change.
Artisha, you've been an integral part of Black Vision since its founding. What was it like to see these protests that began, at home in your neighborhood, reach the rest of the country?
For me, it was like very exciting and also really intense and kind of scary, and not necessarily the protest happening, but like the moment of everybody being polarized and knowing that like we are not turning back and things will only progress further as like conditions for people here in our country and all over the world especially, but here get worse. Like it's only going to get more intense. And as Kandace is saying, like having the pandemic also be a force that gave people a lot of space to even have the time to come out. Because one thing that is very important to me to know is that people have felt these ways and just never actually had the time to express that they feel these ways when you're always trying to survive, and actually having your whole community be out there and want to be connected and fight together. So it was really impactful and beautiful to see years of work and decades of work built upon each other come to a head.
Yeah, there's it's just the beginning of what will be a long movement. It looks like from a historical perspective. But Miski, what signs of progress are you seeing already on policing, and what leaders are you seeing emerge nationally as change agents?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think. Honestly, what has felt like hopeful or inspiring has been the people, right? Like our communities have stayed engaged and continue to stay engaged, even when the media stops paying attention, even when the public isn't necessarily resonating with our demands. It's our community who stays in it, who are talking to one another, pushing each other's understanding of what safety could look like in our city, and really are just like digging into deep engagement with one another to really do the work to build a collective vision around safety in our city. So that's felt really exciting. We are moving forward with engaging our community members around this vision around a people's agenda, right? What does it mean for the people to put forward a collective vision after digging into conversations, not just once or for 1 month or for one summer, right? But for an entire year. And what does it mean for folks to build buy-in into that? I think that the way that the conversation around abolition and defunding the police like spread all across not only this country, but the world, there's just so much space. Like there was a rupture and there's so much space for possibility and transformation. And so what does it mean for us to walk with our people inside of that, inside of this greater understanding that's been created, to develop even more possibility? And yeah, so that's what I feel most inspired by moving into 2021.
Miski mentioned the defund the police phrase, which has been criticized from across the ideological aisle, but from Barack Obama and Congressman James Clyburn, and with on the understanding that it is alienating. People are using that language, and it would alienate people who would otherwise be behind the movement. Knowing what you know now, would you still use that phrase?
Yes, because defunding the police is exactly where we are asking for. And I think the detail is that there's a plan behind that. And the assumption is that there is no plan, and that defunding the police means taking away all forms of safety from people here, and not understanding that we are what keep each other safe. Our communities keep us safe. And one thing that I heard that was really powerful in our budget hearing that we just had last week in Minneapolis, someone in our community had spoken and said, the police don't prevent violence. They literally show up after violence is already happening. And so many instances of people needing help and the police not coming to their aid while seeing it happen. So no, I don't regret us moving with the call to defund the police. And we were already moving with that call before this moment in May. And I think for me, it's a challenge of the English language as well. Our language is really based on business and transactions and things like that, and not necessarily depth. And we often see words for what they are and do not know that they have more meaning than that. And so I'm okay with giving people bold statements that also have a plan versus fantasy empty statements that lead people to nowhere, really.
Miski, since you originally brought it up, I wanted to hear your thoughts on it as well. Obama just said, in critiquing the phrase defund the police, which began as abolish the police in many places, he said, do you want to actually get something done, or do you want to feel good among the people you already agree with? So he set it up as sort of a pragmatic question. Does that ring true to you at all?
I don't know. I have a lot of feelings about this. I think that, the left is often fed this line around being pragmatic, right? Around go for what you actually think you can get, which has always resulted in crumbs for our communities. And so I think it's really disingenuous that Mr. Hope and Change himself is talking about snappy slogans when, a demand like defund the police actually brings people into a bold vision, like Artisha was saying, actually invites them in to help frame something more different. Adrienne Marie Brown says that one of the worst things that capitalism does is that it steals our imagination from us. And so it's actually about inviting people into their imagination, holding the fear that comes up. Of course, people are scared of what no police could look like. Of course, it means a transition. I don't think even the most radical of us expect for there to be, a light switch flipped and 24 hours later to be no police in the streets, right? It's about a transition, and it's about engaging our people in that vision to be the stewards of that vision, to make it actually real and possible. And so, no regret around defund the police. It's a demand that went across the world that has engaged and ignited the imaginations of thousands and millions of people, and has actually brought more people into our movements. And now we can have conversations about the nuances of defunding and decriminalization and harm reduction, all as a way towards abolition. And so it's an invitation. And I don't think that there should be any regret inside of that.
So speaking of transition, we're in a transitional moment in the U.S. administration. Kandace, is there a change or reform that you really hope President-elect Joe Biden will embrace sort of immediately when he enters office or within the first few months?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is the Breathe Act that is coming out of the Movement for Black Lives National Network, which is really calling for a robust policy plan that really gets at the violence of policing, and moves beyond that to really being able to invest and support our communities. That's one thing that I think he absolutely can get behind. The other thing I would say is that what he needs to get behind or move away from is any type of approach that, is solely rooted in compromise at the willingness of the genocide of Black people, and the willingness to continue to invest literally trillions of dollars into the military and police that across the globe, not just here in the US, are being utilized to marginalize and sanction and kill Black people and communities of color. I think that his sort of like modern or centrist approach oftentimes is willing to make some of those compromises for a false sense of safety through policing.
And on the local level, we've seen efforts, of course, from the City Council of Minneapolis, which were made possible and pushed for by the city's activist community, by you and your community. Artisha, I wanted to know what advice you have for other local activists who are looking to push for similar changes in their own communities.
My advice is to be connected and be in community and have real conversations. To not just use words like transparency and accountability, but to be honest with each other, to have kinship and understand that regardless of if you like each other or not, these are the people you want to be liberated with, or these are the people who you see deserve the benefits of this work that we are all doing together. And so don't forget about yourself and don't see yourself and your community and your comrades outside of that lens. I think it's a very important time for all of us across this country to be more connected and understand that individualism is a symptom, is a byproduct of capitalism, and capitalism is the overarching thing that is killing all of us in this country, no matter how it plays. So yeah, that's what I would say.
We have to wrap up this discussion in just a minute, but I do want to end on a maybe resolute note, which is that looking forward, how do you stay hopeful? What gives you hope about the next year? Miski, let's start with you.
What gives me hope for the next year? Honestly, I think the love, joy, pleasure, and connection that I've seen community actually be able to cultivate. I don't think anybody saw 2020 coming. And to be in a pandemic and then to have an uprising spark in our city. And then, everything that went down with this last election and to be on the brink of an economic who knows what. And to see how people have still just shown up for one another and dug in and helped to support each other's needs, help to keep the city running when the elected leadership actually wasn't able to do that. Just gives me so much hope for what's possible. And these moments, we have kept building for years and are going to continue to, and it's just incredible the amount of folks who've come in and who've stayed in, and all the possibility that means that really actually exists for our people and exists for our cities, and the stories that we get to tell because of that.
Kandace, what about you? What can you take from the dumpster fire of 2020 that gives you hope in 2021?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, the saying ignorance is bliss is a real thing. And the experience between the uprisings and the pandemic have forced people to not be able to be ignorant to their experiences, to the ways that systems in our society are really set up against most of us, right? And I think that, that gives me a lot of hope, because then people are then clear about what they're fighting against and for, and that they need to fight. Change only happens when the masses engage in it, and not all of us have to, believe 100% in abolition right now, or we can struggle about what the process to defunding the police looks like. But the fact that I think the majority of our community and really globally our society is, looking much more critically at the way things are set up, the way things are rigged, so to speak, and then looking at those systems and changing those systems as solutions, rather than what we have done for too long, which is just see it as like a few bad apples, right? Whether that be in policing or whether that be in the racist interactions that we have, people are looking and saying, hey, the police are the people who come and evict me when I lost my job and couldn't pay my rent anymore. There's something deeply interconnected and deeply wrong about that. And that like my tax dollars go towards that process instead of a process that supports me in ensuring that me and my family have a home. That is what makes me really hopeful. And ultimately that we are actually on a path forward to transitioning away from, in Minneapolis, our police department, and I think in many cities, are actually on a real and realistic path to doing that in my lifetime. And quite frankly, when I started 2020, especially after the pandemic, I did not think that that was going to be something that I would live to see. I knew that my life's work would be around dismantling the prison and police industrial complex. But never thought that the children that I bear or the folks that come after me and myself will actually be able to see the fruits of that labor. And so that makes me deeply hopeful.
And Artisha, I'll give you the last word here. Just a quick thought on what gives you hope into this next year.
Yeah, what gives me hope into this next year are children, the kids, the youth, the young people, those who are doing their K through 12 schooling online right now. They are the ones who definitely give me hope, and the babies that are born today, because our time is already evading us. And it is those new people who will give us more hope results.
Well, thank you so much, Kandace, Miski, and Artisha, for joining TIME. It was a pleasure speaking with you guys.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.